The hallway smelled of pencil shavings and autumn, crisp leaves pressing against the windows, golden light pooling on the scuffed linoleum. I was 16, shuffling through the crowd, when my math textbook slipped from my arms. Pages fluttered, and before I could crouch, a pair of scuffed Converse stopped beside them. "You're in my third period," he said, handing me the book. His fingers graced mine, just a brush. But my skin prickled like I'd touched a live wire. I knew him, of course. Everyone did. The quiet boy who drummed his fingers during quizzes, who made the teachers sigh with his half smirks. But this close, I noticed things. The chip in his left incisor, the way his sweater sleeve had unraveled at the cuff. He was real in a way he hadn't been before. "Thanks," I mumbled, hugging the book to my chest like armor. He lingered just a second. "You've got a little..." His thumb ghosted near my cheekbone, and I stopped breathing. Chalk dust. Then the bell rang, and he was gone, swallowed by the current of students. But my heart thundered like it had been waiting for him all along. That was the moment. Not the first time I saw him, but the first time I saw him. And nothing, not time, not other loves, would ever dull the lightning of it. The world narrowed to him after that hallway encounter. Everywhere I went, my eyes sought him out like a compass finding north. In physics class, I'd trace the slope of his shoulders as he bent over his workbook. The way his dark hair always fell just slightly into his eyes. At lunch, I memorized his habits. How he always peeled the crust off his sandwiches first. How he tapped his foot when lost in thought. Our silent communication became its own intimate dance. In the crowded school hallway between third and fourth period, he'd slow his steps just enough for our shoulders to almost touch as we passed. In study hall, I'd pretend to read while watching him from beneath my lashes, only to find him already looking back with that same quiet intensity. My stomach would flip when his lips quirked into that half-smile, reserved only for these stolen moments. The library became our sanctuary. We'd claim the same table every Tuesday and Thursday, sitting close enough that I could smell his shampoo. Something clean like pine and citrus. He'd push his finished calculus problems toward me without a word when I struggled. I'd leave doodles in the margins of his notebook when he wasn't looking. Walking home took twice as long those days he happened to be going my way. We'd meander through the park, kicking up autumn leaves, our hands swinging close but never quite connecting. The air between us crackled with everything left unsaid, every glance loaded with meaning. By November, we'd built an entire relationship out of almost touches and nearly spoken words. And somehow, that was more thrilling than any confession could be. The invitation came folded inside my returned history textbook, a single sheet of notebook paper with shaky handwriting. "There's a new horror movie playing at the Rialto. Friday, J." I spent 3 hours agonizing over my reply, drafting and discarding 7 versions before settling on a simple yes, slipped into his locker. Then came the real torture. What did one wear to something that might be a date, but wasn't officially a date? My best jeans and the lavender sweater Grandma knit me last Christmas, won out after 2 nights of frantic wardrobe consultations with my younger sister. He was waiting under the theater marquee at 6:58 p.m., hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, shifting from foot to foot. When he saw me, his whole face lit up like I'd brought the sun with me. "You came," he blurted, then immediately looked mortified. The movie was terrible, some schlocky creature feature with laughable special effects, but it didn't matter. We shared a bucket of popcorn that became an accidental game of finger tag in the dark. During the jump scares, his arm brushed against mine and stayed there. When the killer clown appeared, he whispered, "Don't worry, I'll protect you," in a voice so serious it made me giggle. Afterward, we walked the long way home, dissecting the film's ridiculous plot holes under streetlights that made his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks. At my doorstep, he hesitated, then squeezed my hand quickly before retreating. Next Friday, he called over his shoulder. As I floated inside, I pressed my fingers to my lips, tasting salt from the popcorn and something sweeter, possibility. The first note appeared in my locker on a Tuesday, a folded square of graph paper with "P.S. You have the best laugh" scribbled in the corner. By Friday, I'd slipped a reply into his backpack. "P.S. You bite your lip when you're thinking." Our notebooks became secret diaries for each other. He'd tuck poems between the pages of my return novels. I'd leave song lyrics in his math folder. We developed our own shorthand. A heart meant "I saw this and thought of you." 3 dots meant "I miss you," and a tiny star meant "Remember this moment forever." But the real magic happened after dark. At 10:17 p.m., precisely, my bedroom phone would ring. We'd talk until my eyelids grew heavy, our voices hushed as if sharing secrets with the moon itself. He told me about his parents' divorce, how he hated mushrooms, how he'd once cried at a commercial with a golden retriever. I confessed my fear of thunderstorms, my obsession with collecting sea glass, how I practiced signing my name with his last name when no one was looking. One November night, during a particularly long silence, I heard him breathing softly. "Still there," I whispered. "Always," he replied, the word curling around me like smoke. Outside, rain pattered against my window as we listened to each other exist in the dark. By December, we'd filled a shoebox with our paper trail. My mother found it years later and asked why I'd kept such ordinary notes. But she couldn't see, between the lines, in the creases of every folded corner, our entire universe. It happened on December 23rd, during the first real snow of winter. He'd called at 9:04 p.m., later than usual, his voice tight with excitement. "Come outside," he'd said. When I opened the front door, he stood on my porch, cheeks flushed from the cold, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. "I couldn't wait until tomorrow to show you," he breathed, gesturing to the transformed street. Our neighborhood glowed under fresh snowfall, the kind that muffled every sound and made the world feel new. We walked in comfortable silence, shoulders brushing, until we reached the empty playground. The swings were frozen, but the slide became our throne. We sat at the top, legs pressed together, watching our breath make clouds in the air. When his pinky hooked around mine, my heart stuttered. "Your hands are cold," he murmured, turning to cradle them between his own. In the blue-white moonlight, I saw his gaze drop to my lips. Time slowed. The kiss was soft at first, just a brush of warmth against my winter-chapped mouth. Then his hands found my face, thumbs tracing my cheekbones like I was something rare and precious. When we pulled apart, his eyes held that same quiet wonder from our first meeting in the hallway. Snow kept falling around us, but I'd never felt so warm. The summer we turned 17 stretched before us like an endless golden road. We spent our days in a sun-drenched haze, his skin turning bronze, my hair bleaching blonde at the tips from salt water and sunshine. We borrowed his brother's beat-up convertible and drove with the top down, singing along to crackling radio songs at the top of our lungs. The car smelled like gasoline and the peach air freshener I'd bought him for his birthday. Every pothole sent me sliding across the vinyl seat into his side, and he'd laugh while keeping one hand firmly on the wheel and the other curled around mine. At the abandoned quarry on the edge of town, we'd spread out an old quilt and share lukewarm sodas from the gas station. He taught me the names of constellations while fireflies blinked around us like fallen stars. I read him my favorite poems until his eyelids grew heavy, his head coming to rest in my lap as twilight painted the sky in watercolor hues. One particularly sweltering afternoon, we took refuge in the drugstore's air conditioning, testing every perfume sample until we were dizzy with the clash of scents. When the elderly clerk wasn't looking, he dabbed a stripe of vanilla-scented lotion down my nose, and I retaliated with something muskier on his collar. We stumbled out giggling, smelling like a department store explosion, sticky with heat and young love. As August waned, we pressed wildflowers between the pages of our notebooks, each petal a promise that this season would never really end. It started with a missed call, then 2. By the 3rd unanswered phone tag, I noticed the change, how his texts became clipped responses, how our conversations turned from flowing rivers to careful stepping stones. College brochures began piling up on his bedroom desk like unspoken threats. He'd flip through them absently while I talked, his fingers pausing on glossy photos of campuses halfway across the country. "They have a great engineering program," he'd say, too casually, watching my reaction from the corner of his eye. One rainy afternoon, I found him sitting in his car outside my house, engine running. Through the fogged windshield, I saw him gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor him. When I knocked, he rolled down the window just enough for his words to slip through. "I think we need to talk." The coffee shop we'd always loved felt suddenly foreign. He stirred his hot chocolate long after the marshmallows had dissolved, avoiding my eyes. "It's not that I don't," he started, then stopped. A car horn blared outside, startling us both. That night, lying awake, I replayed every moment of the past year like a detective searching for clues. Had I imagined the way his voice caught when he said my name, the certainty in his touch? The truth settled heavy in my chest. Love wasn't always enough to bridge the distances life created. The first tear fell just as dawn painted the sky gray. Somewhere across town, I knew he was watching the same sunrise, equally alone. The breakup happened on a Tuesday, the most ordinary of days. He chose our bench in the park, the one where we'd shared our first kiss under winter stars. Now autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet like brittle bones as he said the words I'd been dreading. "I think we should—" His voice trailed off, but the meaning hung between us, sharp as shattered glass. I focused on a button on his flannel shirt, the top one, always undone, while my hands turned to ice in my lap. Somewhere nearby, children laughed on the playground, their joy a cruel contrast to the earthquake in my chest. He gave all the right reasons: college, distance, timing. His hands trembled as he spoke, and part of me wanted to hate him for hurting us both. But when he finally looked at me, really looked at me, I saw the same boy who'd once wiped chalk dust from my cheek with such tenderness. We sat there until the streetlights flickered on, our shoulders not quite touching. When he stood to leave, I memorized the way his shadow stretched long across the pavement, how it seemed to linger even after he'd gone. That night, I boxed up our memories: ticket stubs, dried flowers, the mixtape labeled "For When You Miss Me" in his messy handwriting. But I kept one thing, the graph paper note from our beginning. Because some loves deserve to be remembered whole, even when they don't stay. The first month was a blur of hollowed-out mornings and nights that stretched too long. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone at 10:17 p.m., only to remember the silence waiting on the other end. Our song played in grocery stores. Our favorite booth at the diner sat conspicuously empty, and every corner of this small town whispered his name. College acceptance letters arrived like life rafts. I chose a school 5 states away, far enough that the autumn leaves would look different. The streets wouldn't echo with our memories. My mother watched me pack with careful eyes, folding sweaters around framed photos she knew I wouldn't display in my dorm. At orientation, I met a boy from Chicago who quoted Neruda and made me laugh until my ribs ached. When he kissed me under the football bleachers, I kept my eyes open, waiting for lightning that never came. It wasn't fair, not to him, not to me, so I ended it after 3 weeks. Years later, home for Christmas, I saw him outside the old movie theater. He was holding a little girl's mittened hand, his wedding band glinting in the winter sun. Our eyes met across the sidewalk, and for one heartbeat, we were 16 again. All possibility and peach air fresheners. Then he smiled, just slightly, and lifted his daughter onto his shoulders. I walked the other way, finally understanding. Some loves aren't meant to last, only to linger. Now, at 53, I find our story in unexpected places. In the way my grandson's eyes crinkle when he laughs, just like his did. In the scent of pine and citrus from my husband's shampoo. I never told him why I bought that particular brand. In the yellowed graph paper note I still keep tucked behind my driver's license, its edges soft as memory. My book club reads a coming-of-age novel about first love, and the women sigh over youthful passion. I stay quiet, stirring my tea. knowing what they don't, that the truest love stories aren't about forever, but about fingerprints left on your soul. Last week, sorting through the attic, I found our shoebox of memories. The sea glass we collected still glowed like captured sunlight. The movie tickets still bore our teeth marks from sharing them. And pressed between the pages of my old diary was the wild flower he'd tucked behind my ear that last summer day. I hold these fragments up to the light, not with the old ache, but with gratitude. He taught me how to love boldly, how to survive heartbreak, how to let go without bitterness. The girl who loved him exists in the woman I became, not as a wound, but as a foundation. And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful echo of all. Sometimes I still write him in my mind, not to reunite, but to thank him for the girl I was and the woman I became.